We're getting the first reaction coming in from Prime Minister Narendra Modi on his meeting with the American National Security Advisor. The Prime Minister has said had a fruitful meeting with NSA Michael Waltz. He has always been a great friend of India. Defense, technology and security are important aspects of India-USA ties, and we had a wonderful discussion around these issues. There is strong potential for cooperation in sectors like artificial intelligence, semiconductors, space and more. So, Professor Chilani, the Prime Minister has set out the broad contours of the conversations that have been had with the NSA and the NSA, who's actually been a very strong friend of India. The India caucus talked about how India-US relationship needs to be taken altogether to a new level.
Trump has a strong national security team, and the entire team is India-friendly. His Secretary of State, his NSA, his Defense Secretary, and now the Director of National Intelligence, they're all friends of India. And the US-India relationship is key to a stable balance of power in the Indo-Pacific region. The Indo-Pacific is emerging as the world's economic and geopolitical hub. Yes. The next world order will be determined not in Europe or the Middle East. It will be determined in the Indo-Pacific. And that's where America's strategic focus needs to be. And that's why Trump's effort, the current effort to end the war in Ukraine is so important, because it allowed the US to shift its strategic focus from Europe to the Indo-Pacific. Remember Barack Obama in 2011, yes, 14 years ago, unveiled his pivot to Asia policy. 14 years later, America has still not pivoted to Asia, because they got involved in the Middle East wars, then they got involved in the Ukraine war, and then again involved in the Middle East. So they have got mired in regions where their vital interests are not at stake. The vital interests of America are in the Indo-Pacific. That's where China, if it were to commit aggression against Taiwan, if it were to absorb Taiwan, it'll completely change the international security landscape. It'll be the end of America's global preeminence. And also
that is something that America wants to desperately avoid at all costs. They want, and that is where Sushant Sareen, the point that that Professor Brahmachilani was also raising, the Indo-Pacific is very important. India at the top of Indian Ocean region, we are extremely, extremely significant, but all those strong words have to be followed up by very strong action, whether it's the fighter jet engines that India requires, whether it's the ships that India requires, the drones that India requires, and that cutting edge technology that India requires, not just to checkmate China, but be on top of the situation.
No, look, Gaurav, you have up to a point you are right. Okay, but look, I think we are living in a fool's paradise if we think cutting edge technology is going to be given to us by anybody. The Russians have never given it to us. The Americans are not going to give it to us. We have to learn how to make it, or we have to steal it. There is no other way of doing this. Okay. So we need to be very clear about what we can actually expect from them. Number one. Number two, I think where India just really stands out is that unlike the Europeans, who have been mooching off the US for their security for the last 75 years, India has been standing on our own 2 feet. Absolutely. Insofar as our security is concerned. We don't depend, we might depend on people for platforms inputs, and stuff, but we don't depend on them to fund our defense, right? So we are able to stand on our own, and we are probably the only country which has been ready to take on the Chinese the way, we've done over the last 4-5 years. Right? Yep. We've entered into a game of, brinkmanship with them, and we haven't come out bad out of that. So the point is, none of the others have the capacity to stand up to China. Question, however, is how far are we willing to go? Are we ready to get into some kind of an alliance arrangement? And there seems to be a great reluctance in India, and for some very valid reasons, to get into any kind of a grand Eastern NATO kind of an alliance system, right? So where does this defense cooperation, how far does it go?
Well,
Where does
it takes
lead
two
up
to tango. It very clearly takes two to tango. We need the hardware, we need the technology. They need to retain their supremacy vis-a-vis China. It depends on how best can India negotiate and how best will Donald Trump negotiate.